On May 30th, 2013, Tony Oguda was traveling in a PSV matatu from Nakuru to Nairobi when his phone rang. It was the minister's wife on the other end. "Hello, Tony. Can you come over to the house, please?" she asked. Tony paused for a moment, unsure of what to say. He knew this was a risky decision because she was his boss's wife. But their secret romance had been going on for some time now, and the excitement of their forbidden relationship often got the better of him. After a brief hesitation, Tony agreed to meet her. The two of them had always managed to keep their affair hidden, and the thrill of sneaking around without getting caught made him eager to see her. As soon as he arrived in Nairobi, he quickly made his way to her house, unaware of the consequences and horrors that awaited him on the other side. Welcome to Twisted Tales, on our weekly series where we tell crime stories from Kenya and beyond. If this is your type of thing, please don't forget to like and subscribe. To understand the events leading to this forbidden love, let's look at a little history between Tony and the Tujus family. Tony first entered the lives of the Tujus family in 2008 when he was assigned to protect their home as a GSU officer. This came about after Rafael Tujus was appointed as the special legal advisor to the president on matters of ethnic relations and media, a role that required heightened security for his family. Tony's assignment was clear: ensure the safety of the family by manning the entrance to their residence, a position that required vigilance and a constant presence. Every day, Tony would stand at his post, watching over the comings and goings at the Tujus residence. It was during one of these routine shifts that he first saw Mrs. Ruth Tujus. She was graceful, with an air of quiet confidence that drew his attention. Though their initial interactions were brief and purely formal, a nod here, a polite greeting there, they were enough to leave an impression on Tony. At first, there was no noticeable spark between them. Mrs. Tujus was always courteous, treating Tony with respect as someone entrusted with her family's safety. Tony, in turn, remained professional, focused on his duty. Yet, as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, something began to change. Tony noticed that Mrs. Tujus would sometimes linger for a moment longer at the gate, offering a smile or a few words of conversation as she passed by. These small gestures, though seemingly insignificant, started to build a quiet connection between them. Tony found himself looking forward to those brief moments when she would walk by, and Mrs. Tujus seemed to reciprocate in subtle ways, perhaps a lingering glance or a warm smile. Despite this growing familiarity, their relationship remained within the bounds of propriety, at least on the surface. Neither of them made any overt moves, and the spark that might have ignited something more was still just a flicker in the background. For now, Tony was just the GSU officer at the gate, and Mrs. Tujus was simply the lady of the house. But beneath the surface, the foundation for something more was slowly being laid. Tony had little else to focus on besides his work, as he was already married to his childhood sweetheart, Ms. Esther Okumu. Their relationship had deep roots, built over years of growing up together, and they had recently welcomed a son into their lives. This young family was his world, and he took pride in his role as a husband and father. Despite his commitment to his family, Tony couldn't ignore the stark differences between his life and the lives of the Tujus. He was much younger than both Mr. and Mrs. Tujus, and their world of power and privilege seemed far removed from his own. While Tony was in the prime of his youth, trying to provide for his family, the Tujus were established figures with significant influence and resources. This age difference and the vast gap in their social standing should have kept their lives completely separate, with Tony focused on his duties and his young family. But as he spent more time at the Tujus residence, these differences only added to the complexity of his situation. The line between his professional responsibilities and the personal connections he was beginning to form grew increasingly blurred, setting the stage for events that would soon unfold. The Tujus had long been seen as the embodiment of a perfect marriage. Their union was not just a partnership, but a powerful symbol of success and harmony, often celebrated in the public eye. Magazines like Drum regularly featured them, showcasing their elegant lifestyle and the strong bond they appeared to share. They were the kind of couple others admired and aspired to be: polished, successful, and seemingly unshakable. To the public, they were the it couple. Whether attending high-profile events or being photographed for glossy magazine spreads, the Tujus always appeared united, exuding an aura of sophistication and stability. Their marriage was the stuff of headlines, a shining example of what many believed a perfect union should look like. This image of perfection made the reality of their private lives all the more concealed. While they projected a flawless facade to the outside world, the complexities beneath the surface were hidden from public view. The attention they received as a couple only added to the mystique surrounding their relationship, making it seem invulnerable to the challenges that ordinary couples face. Their journey together began in the mid-1980s when Rafael Tujus was a charismatic young TV presenter, capturing the attention of viewers across the country with his charm and poise. It was during this time that he and Ruth decided to formalize their love in a church wedding in 1986, a ceremony that marked the beginning of what appeared to be an enduring and successful marriage. By now, the Tujus had reached a point where they could fully enjoy the fruits of their loyalty and love. They lived in a palatial home in the upscale Karen neighborhood, a symbol of the success they had built together over the years. Their home was filled with warmth and joy, shared with their 3 beautiful children, who were the pride of their lives. Having navigated the challenges of marriage and emerged stronger, the Tujus now indulged in the pleasures that their hard work had afforded them. According to a 2011 interview with Drum magazine, they spoke fondly of the vacations they took as a family, often returning to their favorite spots like Diani, where the sun, sand, and sea provided the perfect backdrop for relaxation and bonding. These moments of escape were more than just vacations. They were celebrations of a life well lived and a relationship that had stood the test of time. The Tujus' ability to maintain such a strong connection, even as they reached the heights of success, only added to their image as the ideal couple. A partnership that was not just about surviving the years, but thriving through them, surrounded by love and the joy of their family. However, despite overcoming numerous challenges that tested their marriage, there was one issue that persistently lingered in the Tujus household: the problem of loneliness. This loneliness was an unwelcome companion, born out of the demanding nature of Rafael Tujus' political career. As Tujus' responsibilities grew, so did the time he spent away from home. His work often required him to travel, attend late-night meetings, and focus on the pressures of public life. While his political success brought prestige and opportunities, it also meant that he was frequently absent from the family home. For Mrs. Ruth Tujus, this absence created a void. The palatial house in Karen, despite its beauty and the love of their children, often felt empty without Rafael's presence. The weight of his demanding schedule left her spending many days and nights alone, longing for the companionship of the man she had married years ago. The success they had built together now came at the cost of their time together, and the emotional distance began to grow. This loneliness was a silent burden that Ruth carried, one that was not easily shared or understood by others. It was the one trial that they could not entirely overcome, as it was woven into the fabric of Rafael's career. Even as they celebrated their victories and milestones, the ache of isolation quietly persisted, a constant reminder of the sacrifices that came with their life in the public eye. As a special advisor and envoy to President Kibaki, Rafael Tujus often had to leave his Karen home for various assignments. These duties took him across the country and sometimes abroad, further straining the time he could spend with his family. While Tujus' work was crucial to the nation, it also meant long periods of absence from home, leaving his wife, Ruth, to manage the household and care for their children largely on her own. The situation became even more challenging in 2011 when Tujus announced his bid presidency. This new chapter in his political career demanded even more of his time and energy, as the campaign trail required his constant attention. The pressure and demands of running for the highest office in the land meant that Tujus was more absent than ever, often immersed in meetings, public appearances, and strategizing sessions that left little room for family life. For Ruth, this period was particularly difficult. The loneliness that had always been a quiet part of their marriage now intensified, as she found herself more isolated than before. The weight of supporting her husband's ambitions while coping with his frequent absences took a toll on her emotional well-being. What had once been a partnership where they navigated challenges together now felt like a solitary journey for Ruth, as Tujus' political aspirations took center stage. This strain on their marriage was not something that could be easily discussed or resolved, as the nature of Tujus' career made it a necessary sacrifice. Yet, the impact on Ruth was profound, as she struggled with the growing distance between them, both physically and emotionally, during this pivotal time in their lives. As Rafael Tujus' presidential campaign intensified, he found himself spending longer and longer periods away from home, traveling across the country in search of votes. The demands of the campaign left him with little time for anything else, and when Ruth needed him the most, when she longed for a shoulder to cry on and a chest to lie on, he was not there. His focus was on winning the presidency, and his absence became more pronounced with each passing day. Feeling increasingly isolated and emotionally neglected, Ruth found herself struggling to cope with the loneliness that had long been a part of her life. The man she had once relied on for comfort and support was now consumed by his political ambitions, leaving her to face the challenges of life on her own. The void in her heart grew larger, and the more distant Tujus became, the more she sought solace elsewhere. As Tujus traversed the country, delivering speeches and shaking hands with potential voters, Ruth began to keep herself busy in ways that filled the emptiness his absence had created. What started as a coping mechanism slowly turned into something more, a search for a replacement for the emotional connection she had lost with her husband. She found herself drawn to the attention and affection that had been missing from her life for so long, seeking out a sense of companionship that Tujus could no longer provide. This decision marked a turning point in Ruth's life, as the loneliness that had once been a silent burden now pushed her towards choices that would have lasting consequences. While Tujus was out on the campaign trail, determined to secure his place in the nation's leadership, Ruth was on her own path, looking for the love and support she so desperately needed. Ruth Tujus, grappling with the emotional void left by her husband's relentless campaign schedule, found solace in Anthony Oguda. When she approached him, he fully grasped the nature of the situation and embraced his role with a level of dedication. His primary task was straightforward: make Ruth happy and keep his role discreet, which he executed with exceptional skill. Anthony's approach was simple yet effective. He provided the companionship and attention Ruth craved, and in return, she showered him with everything he desired. He became her confidant and companion, receiving not just affection but also substantial material benefits. Ruth ensured that he wanted for nothing, indulging him with cash, expensive outings, and luxurious experiences. Ruth's generosity extended to securing a deluxe apartment for Anthony on Gong Road, a clear sign of how seriously she took their arrangement. This lavish lifestyle was a stark contrast to the more reserved and public image she maintained with her husband. In Anthony, she found a partner who made her feel valued and cared for, filling the gap left by Rafael's political ambitions and frequent absences. Ruth's extravagant gestures towards Tony, while intended to provide him with a lavish lifestyle and secure his loyalty, ended up causing unintended consequences. The relationship between Ruth and Tony became so entangled that Tony's commitment to her led to a significant fallout in his own life. Tony's increasingly intimate involvement with Ruth resulted in him abandoning his own wife, Esther, whom he had left behind in their Eastlands home. Esther, feeling the strain and confusion of her husband's sudden absence, began to investigate the reasons for his departure. It was a painful and shocking discovery when she learned that Tony had moved in with Ruth, his boss's wife. The betrayal was a heavy blow for Esther, and the revelation left her devastated. In her anger and hurt, She reached out to Rafael Tujus, sending him a message that laid bare the affair and the impact it had on her life. The text she sent to Tujus was a desperate plea for recognition of the damage caused, and it highlighted the tangled web of deceit and betrayal that had ensnared both families. The situation unraveled further as the affair between Ruth and Tony became more exposed, complicating both their personal lives and their public images. What began as a way for Ruth to seek solace had escalated into a scandal that affected everyone involved, revealing the hidden cost of their choices and the impact of their actions on their relationships. When Rafael Tujus learned about the affair between his wife, Ruth, and Tony, he was understandably furious. The revelation struck a deep chord, and his anger was palpable. Despite the intensity of his emotions, Tujus chose to handle the situation with a sense of decorum and respect, staying true to his reputation as a gentleman. He decided to call a meeting at his Karen home, inviting both Ruth and Tony to address the situation directly. The meeting was charged with tension, but Tujus approached it with a level-headed demeanor. He made it clear that the affair was unacceptable and that it needed to end immediately. During the meeting, both Ruth and Anthony were confronted with the gravity of their actions. Faced with Tujus' unwavering stance and the seriousness of the situation, they agreed to end their illicit relationship. Their commitment to terminating the affair was a formal acknowledgement of the boundaries that had been crossed and a step towards repairing the damage done. Tujus' approach, while firm and resolute, reflected his desire to resolve the issue with dignity. The meeting at his home was a crucial moment in dealing with the fallout of the affair, setting the stage for moving forward and addressing the consequences of their actions. Despite Rafael Tujus' attempt to resolve the situation with dignity and his expectation that Ruth and Anthony would end their affair, the agreement proved to be futile. Far from ending their relationship, Ruth and Anthony continued their affair, and their behavior became increasingly brazen. Tony and Ruth's relationship grew more open and public. Tony, no longer hiding his feelings, began to openly show affection towards Ruth, disregarding the secrecy that had once shrouded their relationship. This new openness only added to the tension and complexity of the situation. In a particularly shocking turn, Tony even began texting Tujus' children to inquire about their mother's whereabouts. This level of intrusion not only violated the boundaries of propriety, but also intensified the emotional turmoil for everyone involved. The personal and family dynamics became entangled in a public display of defiance and disregard for the consequences of their actions. The affair, once hidden behind closed doors, now played out with an unsettling transparency, further straining the relationships and complicating the already turbulent situation. The public and personal repercussions of their continued involvement only deepened the rift within the Tujus family, turning what could have been a resolution into a prolonged and painful conflict. The situation grew even more complicated due to Tony's increasing dependence on Ruth Tujus. After being implicated in an extortion scandal, Tony lost his job, which left him financially and professionally vulnerable. With his career in shambles, he relied heavily on Ruth for both emotional and financial support. Tony's dependence on Ruth only served to embolden his behavior. No longer constrained by his previous professional responsibilities, he began to visit Tujus' home at odd hours, showing up unannounced and without regard for the sanctity of the Tujus family's private space. His visits, often at inappropriate times, were a stark reminder of the personal and professional fallout from the scandal. This shameless conduct, driven by his desperate situation, exacerbated the tension within the Tujus household. Tony's frequent and intrusive visits only served to heighten the discomfort and distress for everyone involved, creating a volatile environment that was far from resolved. Ruth's willingness to support him financially and emotionally, despite the damage their affair had already caused, added another layer of complexity to the situation, making it clear that their relationship had far-reaching consequences beyond their personal lives. Rafael Tujus, already seething with anger over the affair and the intrusion into his family's life, reached a breaking point. The continual presence of Tony in his home, especially at inappropriate hours, only fueled his frustration. In response to this brazen behavior and the violation of his family's privacy, Tujus took decisive legal action. He swiftly obtained a restraining order against Tony, which legally prohibited him from coming into close contact with Tujus' family or properties. This order was a clear and formal statement that Tony was no longer welcome in any capacity. Alongside this, Tujus filed for divorce from his wife, Ruth, marking the end of their marriage and publicly addressing the betrayal and emotional turmoil caused by her affair. The restraining order reflected Tujus' determination to protect his family and restore some semblance of order and privacy to their lives. It was a harsh but necessary step to safeguard his personal space and well-being from the disruptive and harmful effects of Tony's ongoing presence and actions. Despite the restraining order barring him from Tujus' property and interactions with the family, Tony's need for Ruth and his disregard for the legal boundaries led him to accept an invitation to their Karen home in May 2013. Ruth, continuing her affair with Tony despite the legal and personal consequences, called him to the house, an invitation that Tony, in his desperation, could not resist. Tony's visit was not only a violation of the restraining order, but also a blatant act of defiance against the legal measures in place. When he arrived at the Karen residence, the situation quickly escalated. The security personnel and Tujus' associates, adhering to the restraining order, confronted Tony. The confrontation turned physical, with Tony being subjected to beatings before being detained. His arrest for trespass underscored the seriousness of the restraining order and the lengths to which Tujus and his team were willing to go to enforce it. Tony's attempt to ignore the legal boundaries set by Tujus resulted in a very public and humiliating end to his defiant behavior, further complicating the already volatile situation surrounding the affair. Despite the restraining order, Tony and Ruth Tujus continued their relationship even after Tony's arrest for trespassing. Their refusal to end the affair contributed to their dramatic fall from grace, as their personal turmoil and defiance against legal boundaries only escalated the situation. Tragically, just 2 months later, in July 2013, Tony was found dead under mysterious circumstances in an apartment owned by Rafael Tujus. At the time, Tujus was out of the country, away from the scene of the unfolding crisis. Tony's death was shrouded in mystery and raised numerous questions, given the intense and highly publicized nature of his relationship with Ruth and the legal troubles that had ensued. The circumstances surrounding Tony's death added a tragic and unsettling twist to the already tumultuous events. It marked the end of a chaotic chapter in the lives of those involved, with the fallout from his demise leaving lingering questions and a deep sense of unresolved conflict. 3 months after Tony's mysterious death and following Rafael Tujus' successful efforts to remove her from his home, Ruth Tujus' life took a dramatic turn. Once celebrated as a millionaire's wife, she found herself in a starkly different reality. Ruth was seen selling matumbo, beef tripe, at a new hotel she had opened, a far cry from her previous affluent lifestyle. This new venture marked a significant shift from her past opulence to a more modest means of earning a living. The contrast between her former status and her current situation was striking, reflecting the profound impact of the personal and legal upheavals she had experienced. Her fall from grace, transitioning from a life of luxury to one of hustle and hard work, underscored the dramatic changes she faced in the aftermath of the scandal and its consequences. The reversal of her fortunes was a sobering reminder of how quickly circumstances can shift and the challenges that come with navigating such significant personal and financial changes. If you think the case ends here, then you are gravely mistaken. Join us next week as we unravel the speculations about Tujus' involvement in all this. Thanks for watching. Till next time.